Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another fun interview. We've got it's the 170th. Do you see that on the screen there? Uh, it's we've got Robert Berman on with us tonight. He's been on CAF for a while. Many of you got to meet him at Heroes and probably a few other shows. I think he went to Como this year. We've seen him in photographs, and tonight we get to hang out and learn what makes Robert tick as an art collector. But before we do, I have to let you know I've been talking about having Dan Jurgens on tomorrow night, and Dan has had to postpone it, so he's going to be rescheduled to Monday, September 18th. So I'll have Tuesday off, as will you. I don't know what you're going to do with your time, but it's all yours for tomorrow night. So without further ado, let me bring Robert into the chat. Hey, Robert, how are we tonight?
Hello, everybody. Glad to be here.
It's nice to see art on the walls.
Yeah, some things don't fit in the portfolio. My wall space is limited. I'm at my office right here. At home, wall space is very limited because I have a lot of bookcases. So portfolios are the rule. But my wife lets me put some up here at the office.
So do you intentionally buy art that doesn't fit into the portfolios so you can forces you to hang them on the walls?
I certainly have to figure that out when you're looking at it. Is where exactly is this going to live? So yeah. We're actually doing an expansion at my office, which I'm using as justification for, we need some art to put on the walls.
Well, of course. Well, I like your way of thinking. See, that's, I don't really approach my art buying in that way, but it's a good way to think about it, right? Well, I guess I do. I mean, you look at the stuff on the back wall there. I know when I'm going to get something if I'm going to hang it up. But yeah, not every collector hangs art on the wall. So have you, was that something that you adopted early on? I mean, as far as, just your way of collecting, or did you just realize at some point you felt like you had to see them every day?
No, it was mainly, the bottom line is especially the pieces that are too big for a portfolio, that's kind of a slam dunk for the wall. And then there's a few pieces I've got that could be in a portfolio, but that I knew at the time I was getting it, I was gonna worth framing. So like the Miles piece that I put on CAF last week, that I have that for framed for the wall. You'll see that maybe next week or in the future.
Very cool. So you know how we usually get these things rolling, right? Ask for your origin story and the hobby.
Right.
How did you get into this crazy hobby of ours that we all love?
Right. So I was trying to figure out the origin of my comic buying, which sort of figures into the some of the pieces we're going to be looking at. If you but my parents had gotten me 3 comic books for Christmas of 1980, and I was trying to figure out if it was that or my cousin had a pile of early 70s DC comics. And between those two, that was when I started reading comics, and read as a kid through several years through junior high. Then I started, I got a CD player for Christmas one year, and that was the beginning of buying music instead of comic books in the mid 80s. And so, a poor kid can only afford one hobby, and CDs are a lot more expensive than comic books were. So I fell out of comics and totally missed the second half of the 80s and all of the 90s. And then came back into it more recently when some people started showing me some comics. And my first collecting was a Paul Smith piece. I guess I must have been looking at art for a couple of years, because apparently I joined CAF in 2018, but I didn't get any art in 2018.
I noticed that. It seemed like you were on CAF for a couple of years before you posted your first piece. That was one of my questions for you.
Yes. Yeah, I didn't. It's because I didn't have any. But I guess looking at CAF is probably what made me aware that art was out there, and I started saying, well, what artists do I like? What artists were ones whose name I even knew to look up on the internet. And so Paul Smith was one of those that I remembered from my XMen days as a kid. And so I started looking at his website and saw that sometimes he had art for sale. And I happened to log on, I guess, in the split second when it was recently posted, because if you looked at his website, it doesn't stick around long. But I managed to get a Saturn Girl from him. That was my first original art piece, and just kind of went from there and started figuring out the whole world. And CAF has been, very pivotal in all of that.
Well, I like to hear that. So yeah, you were lucky if you went to Paul's site and saw a piece or two available because everybody is always anxious for when he does update his site, and everything typically goes the moment he posts stuff. So that was a good first start. Usually everybody has kind of a stumbling out the gate first start, but you didn't have that. That's good.
I didn't, I had been going to meet with friends at Dragon Con for a few years, and I was vaguely aware that they had an art area at Dragon Con. It's Dragon Con's massive, and so the art area is a tiny portion of the whole convention, but there's usually like, I don't know, 50 artists there or something. So I started going to that once I had gotten my first piece to see what was there, and just learning how to do this whole thing.
I'm going to put a link into the chat for everybody. I think I linked to your CAF Gallery in the show description, but putting it in the chat now for those of you hanging out makes it easier to get in there. Jeff Wedding says he's always 10 minutes to 2 hours late going over to Paul's site.
Yep.
So, as are we all generally, Jeff. I think the few pieces I picked up, I've had to pick up on the secondary market, and I love his stuff. So
yeah. I've since got one more piece on the secondary market, which was, the secondary market is probably priced at what they all ought to be. It seems to me, they're worth to me, they're worth more than he's charging for them. And it's fascinating that he's chosen to not respond to that.
Well, it's some artists like to keep they're happy with whatever that amount is that they're charging, and they, they don't pay attention to the secondary market and those sorts of things. So, that's okay. More power to them, right? Yeah. Benno says he hopes to see you at Dragon Con again this year.
Yes, planning to it. Benno's one of the he's helped show me the ropes among other people, and I've been grateful for his tutelage.
Yeah, Benno's he's been around the track a few times. He definitely can give you the best suggestions and advice than as any other collector who's been in it over 20 years. But no, Benno's definitely the best. So where are you based out of? I don't think I asked you that.
I live in a small town in Middle Tennessee.
Okay.
So in the middle of nowhere.
But that's good location-wise, because you can go to a lot of different shows because you're in central states.
Yeah, about 3 hours from Atlanta, 4, 5, maybe like 5 hours from Charlotte. So, and then Nashville's 2 hours, and so close to several things, but not anywhere in particular.
Right, and nothing right in your hometown, though, of course.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone in my county who has any idea, wouldn't know what any of this is.
Well, so after you picked up your first Paul Smith, then what? That was about 4 years ago, I'm assuming.
Yeah. So, like I said, I had been going to Dragon Con, and I started paying attention to the original art there and realizing that there were artists there I had heard of. So my first commission was Mike Grell at Dragon Con. I had him do a wildfire for me, which is up there, and I had by then started reading comics and trade paperback to see what I had missed from 1986 through probably 2010, I guess it probably was, that I was totally out of the comic reading. And Kitson was there, and I had enjoyed his Legion of Superheroes, so I got him to do one for me, and then just started trying to ask about who is this artist, who is that artist. I found myself, Heritage, of course, was helpful to see what was out there for sale, and I often will start with the art and then work my way back to who is this artist, what is this story. So very little of my art is nostalgia purchase. Yeah, so that was one of my.
That was the grill, right?
There. That's the grill right there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you were saying some of the purchases are nostalgia based, or
some, there's certainly when I see one that I recognize from being a kid, that's one of the things that can get my attention about a piece of art. That's a small percentage of my collection, simply because as a kid from the early 80s, the stuff that was popular with me is popular with everybody else. There's not, a lot of golden Micronauts pages just floating around out there waiting for me to claim them.
Right. That's if you're after golden Micronauts, you're in a competitive market right there.
Yes,
as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah, or yes, it would be nice to have a Burn Alpha Flight page, or but some of these things are just maybe a target of opportunity. But most of my pieces are I'm sort of a lurker on the CGC forums, and we have what we call the Morlock pages, which is pages under $500. They're down in the tunnels, and so I have some that I paid more for, but really most of my collection is lower value things, trying to find recent artists that maybe will be worth more one day or maybe won't, but just are affordable, and I can enjoy for the art even if I don't remember the story from when I was 11 years old.
Right. Well, and but we talk about that a lot on here, that I mean, you can be disappointed in some of the prices on stuff today, but there's always going to be affordable comic book art.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and it's it's beautiful. I found that a great affinity for type pencil pages, which are often I like better, at least as much and maybe more than the inked work or the final published work.
Sure. No, I mean, it's yeah, there's always going to be stuff like that. Yeah, but what's the best Morlock art that you've bought in your opinion?
Oh goodness. Oh.
Or riddle off a few pieces. I mean, I
Let's
don't know
see.
if there are any of the pieces
Oh,
you submitted.
I've gotten some nice pieces by Pensica Ferreira. Alvaro Bueno Martinez is terrific. Let's see. I got a Jim Caliafori Forceworks double page spread that was more like price. Let's see. Let me jog my memory here. I can look at my own gallery for a second. Of course, in the thread there.
Do you buy frequently from other collectors, or do you pretty much focus on the auction houses and dealer sites?
Only things I bought from other collectors have been on CAF Live, actually. Well, that's not the only truth. I bought some on Facebook. Oh, I know. I was able to get 4 Ultimates pages by Hitch and Neri, surprisingly cheap at that Profiles in History auction in late 2019.
One of their last. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And so those were probably one of the few where I like, wow, I feel like I got a really good deal on this, and I'm still maybe undereducated to even be able to say this was a really good deal, but I can at least say I really like it, and I'm glad it was that price.
Well, you have a lot of art in your CAF gallery for somebody who's really only just getting started. I was going to comment on that too.
Yeah, there's probably some squirrel. Ooh, it's a bright shiny object,
Right. Oh yeah.
And once you have one of something, it's tempting to look and see if there's any more in the run. Sort of Pokemon, gotta catch them all ethos. I'm well aware of the quantity over quality in the sense of like in demand, if quality is measured by demand, to whatever extent that's true. I mean, there's so much art. There's so many artists that quality is, in one sense, easy to come by if you don't have to have the character of your choice in the issue of your choice. If you just enjoy a nicely drawn piece of art.
Well, that's. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. But how? I mean, you must have a package coming in almost every week, right? Because
yes, pretty much. I'm a regular on the Heritage weekly auction, and I've sort of learned that maybe it's a good idea not to put everything that I have out there, but most of what I have is out there, because I figure, again, I don't have anyone locally who's particularly interested in seeing it, and so keep hoarding it from somebody around the world who maybe would enjoy seeing it. I don't mind putting it on CAF. I hear people say that maybe decreases the long-term value of it because it's no longer a surprise, but I think there's just a reward in enjoying something and sharing it with other people who enjoy it.
I have heard similar thoughts out there. I mean, I don't know. I think good art will always be worth, what it's supposed to, and that I don't know. There's always that freshness to market concept, but where it might create a bit of a fervor for people to overpay for something. But again, art. I think art holds its value. So showing it for any length of time is it gonna? It's only gonna make it not maybe have that extra goose somewhere down the road. But how often do we as collectors hold on to pieces that could potentially have that windfall later on, right? I mean, how many George Perez covers from the 70s do you have that you're hiding from us, Robert?
Yeah.
Not too many.
No,
Me neither.
Not many.
But but those are the kinds of things that would benefit from hiding from the rest of humanity, and that we as art collectors, because that's or a rare Kirby, stuff like that, but not many collectors are blessed with that kind of artwork in their collections that they can hide and hope that it'll give them a 20% bonus 5 years from now. But CJ says great gallery, Robert, so I'm glad they're looking around there. And where was it? Marcus said that the irony is that Morlock XMen art is very expensive. From
Yes.
Paul Smith, it is. That's for sure.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I have no Paul Smith XMen page. So
me neither. I don't think I'm sure I've been in the presence of a few Paul Smith XMen pages, but as long as I've known Mike, he's never had a Paul Smith XMen page available for sale. And that's 20 years where I've been going over to his place, seeing stuff. I mean, he's had Paul Smith art, but never a Paul Smith Uncanny page. So they, those tend to go. I mean, sure, they come up in Heritage every once in a while, but a lot of those pages go between collectors. Because collectors know the value, and usually you can get a little bit more out of something. If you're trading or whatnot between collectors, because they are just so hard to come by.
Avoiding the 20% from each of you, has some value. On Heritage has got.
It definitely does.
Plus 10% sales tax, and so.
Yeah, it's not easy to be an art collector these days in some ways, is it? I mean, with all the fees and different things going on. I mean, it's part of the game. I think everybody has, some level of added expense to the hobby. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of where we're at right now. It wasn't that way 20 years ago, certainly, but we really didn't. Heritage wasn't really even coming in its own at that point. So, they've definitely helped change things. Marcus reminds us we can always buy Mannix art. That is very true, Marcus. Everybody loves Mannix.
It does push the price up, but at the same time, probably realistically, it brings art out into the marketplace that would have just stayed in somebody's portfolio otherwise. So, I'm certainly exhibit A of, being able to find things at Heritage, and I buy frequently, but I tend to buy low. I sort of regret when you're buying on the low end, the fees end up taking an even bigger chunk than when you're buying a big piece, but I do anyway.
No, well, of course, that's part of the fun, though. I mean, the hunt, trying to get some pages that might go a little bit under the radar, whether it's Heritage or Comic Link or whatnot, or sometimes eBay. But I haven't been an active bidder, at least an active bidder serious enough that I was going to win anything. I've thrown bids out there a lot now that I've been doing those weekly picks on the CAF update. And I learned early on not to talk about the pieces that I was throwing bids on. There was that point in time where I was trying to get a Lee Elias page, and everyone I'd actually be serious about, and think, I know this is a $250 page. I'll bid $250 on it. And every time it would go to, the next increment, 275 or 300 in it. But I would talk about it in the CAF update. That's when I realized I'm not going to talk about any artwork that I want anymore.
Yeah. Well, especially because it seems that they get large collections from people en masse and then dribble it out over time. And so, talking about one piece in what turns out is going to be a run of 12 pieces, can spike your chances until it's obvious it's all gone. I was lucky to be getting into Heritage just when Murphy Anderson was, I guess, selling off it, or his estate was being sold off. And one of those pieces is one we're going to talk about tonight. And I see now that that's a thing that happens. And so I'm just alert to see what else starts showing up repeatedly.
Right. Like, I know Al Milgram gave Heritage a lot of his artwork, and obviously they're selling off the, a lot of Garfield Sundays and dailies and things. So it's, but like you were talking about earlier, I mean, the reason we've seen so many great pieces come out of late, in the last 3 years, is because the market was so strong. People wanted to test the waters and see what what their pieces were really worth.
Yeah, and it's nice to see them, come out into the open and say, there's, I think, an element of regret and say, the Peonies are giving all of the ElfQuest to Columbia, is it? And I wonder how much they will be seen. Or are they going to? Those of us who enjoy the art hate the thought of it languishing. I would rather have it be in someone's collection who's enjoying it, even if it's not in mine. Rather than sitting in a drawer somewhere like Raiders of the Lost Ark,
right,
a big warehouse full of unopened treasures.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what we saw at the Billy Ireland in Columbus when we went there. It was just so much. They only have so much that they can display at any given time, and I'm sure there's got to be stuff that never sees the light of day unless they pull it out of a the flat file. All those Hal Fosters that I mean, I don't think they'd ever had a Hal Foster show. So when you have a couple hundred Hal Foster Valiant, Prince Valiant Sunday strips that nobody's going to ever see, it is a little discouraging. I mean, it's good to know that they're there and pretty well protected and everything, but you're right. It would be good to see some of those things out on the market. But it's an artist's prerogative, right? Walt Simonson. I mean, what he's going to do with his, always talk about burying himself with them, but I'm sure that's not what he's going to do. He'll probably donate it to one of the to a museum or a school or something like that, and that's all. I mean, what are you going to do at the end of the day? We can't we don't define determine whether an artist wants to sell their stuff or not, unfortunately.
Yeah, it happened in the music world. Like J.S. Bach was neglected for centuries. The generation after him apparently lost interest in what he was doing and neglected to pass it on, and then the next 300 years didn't even have a chance to make the choice of, do I want to listen to Bach or not, because he hadn't been presented to their parents as an option.
Right.
And then something happened in the late 19th, early 20th centuries where someone said, wait a minute, this guy's great.
Benno's agreeing with us on the idea that, university or museum donations, because it's true. I mean, there's just stuff that, who knows what's really out there. And then a lot of these museums don't have, digital files with which we can go and browse through and, to see what's there. The Billy Ireland has one, and it's an awful search engine, unfortunately. So it's hard to really determine what they have and what they don't. And I mean, there's probably a lot more in public collections than we would care to like to know about, because you never know what somebody's going to pass along and donate for whatever reason. So I don't have anything by Wendy Peony, Marcus, but thank you for asking. I know you spelled that right too. Anyway, I'd love to get a piece of ElfQuest artwork though, and I've actually thought about having them on the show just to talk to them, because I think they'd have a pretty interesting story as far as a pair of artists. I'd love to just get an hour or 2 hours with them and just pick their brains on what was going through their process early on, doing creator owned project that was so memorable to so many of us who were collecting back in the day. And Jeff Wedding, he knows this full well too, working for the state and archival stuff. He says indexing and scanning archives are always behind. It's true. It is very true. And and that requires public money to put those things out there in a format that's digestible for us as well. So yeah, well, let's get back to talking about you, Robert. So I know you've given me a pretty decent set of artworks to look at. And I got to meet you at Heroes that time. Did you have a good time at that show?
Yeah, that was good. That was my second Heroes. I went the first time and didn't know anybody and was totally lost and missed there were some CAF events going on that I was oblivious to because I wasn't even on the email list last year. I found out at the show that there was an email list I could have been on to find out what was going on at the show. So, it's definitely there's a learning curve in the hobby, and I've been enjoying climbing it over the last 4 or 5 years. Heroes was a fun show. This time, the first time I went, and we'll talk about this later, but I had a jam piece that I was interested in finishing out, and I focused all my efforts on that. and didn't really get to see as many of the artists that were there. And this time I really tried to focus on seeing the artists and the work they had brought instead of trying to get them to generate new work for me at the show. And I found that rewarding and extremely full. I was there all 3 days from the time it opened to the time it closed, seeing new artists in their work. And even at the end of the last day, I was like, oh, look, I don't know anything about this person.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I should get one of their pieces.
Exactly. Now, Hero's great for that. I mean, there's always artists there that I am not familiar with, and many of them I didn't get to see, but I got to see the artworks that people picked up after the fact, and I was like, boy, I wish I would have seen that person's table, because there was a couple artists there who I knew, or where I knew after the fact, had really great work, priced probably a little undervalued, but that I would have loved to at least seen, if not bought a few pieces from.
Yeah. So no, that was great. I would certainly recommend Heroes to anybody who hasn't been.
Yeah, no, that's good. So you were there the year before then?
Yeah, that was my first time. In fact, I met you there at the Drink and Draw, and we chatted briefly 2 years ago, and hung out with J.K. Woodwards, an artist that I spent some time with at that first one, and then met again at this most recent one. And so it's nice to be in a hobby where the artists are accessible, because in many industries, like if you're a music fan, the band of your choice probably isn't just not available to hang out with you. Like the comic artists are available, not just one, but en masse, to sit in a bar and there's, Jim Shooter talking to Chris Claremont, 2 tables over.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, that's what makes our hobby special. I think, you could say it goes beyond that. It makes the overall comic fandom special, right? That you can actually get to know the creators closely, and they're just down to earth folk by and large, just like we are. That's what we love about it, right? That we get to interact with the people whose work we admire, whether they're writers or artists. And I think that when we get turned on to art, it just makes everything even more special, because now you're actually getting to own something that they did. And I mean, I don't know, I love the hobby more and more every day, just because it's so much fun, and the opportunities and the people I get to talk with on a daily basis. I mean, I just feel really lucky. And I think everybody does. It's just, that's why you look forward to the shows, when you might get to meet an artist you've not gotten to talk to before, or to get, even if you're just going there to get something signed, it's still a pretty special thing.
I know many of us are very appreciative to you for your role in helping to, sort of serve as a hub and help to connect us to each other. So we're both to the artists and to the other fans.
Well, I try to do my best. Sometimes I don't do well, but some other times I do pretty good. And Jiggy's in the audience. Hey, Jiggy, nice to see you. Good morning to you. Jiggy also enjoys meeting other CAF folk as well. And I saw earlier, I think Marvel #1 fan said he loves the color blue on your back wall. So it makes the artwork really pop. And I have to admit, it really does.
It's a Superman theme. So here we got the red and the blue. I had this when I was a kid in grade school. There was an art book for grade schoolers called Ed Emberley's Book of Everything or something, and it had to show how to draw little figures. And I tried to draw comic books. I'm not an artist. I've never been a good artist, but I did try to draw one, because at the end of one of the books, Ed Emberley's Book of People, had show you how to draw something called Super Person, which was basically a stick figure of Superman in blue and red. And so I would make little Superman comic books, Super Person comic books, an SP on his chest, in this blue and this red. I tried to convince my parents to let me embed a carpet version in the carpet of my bedroom, but they said that was too expensive to cut carpet into geometrical shapes like that. But here in my office, I did manage to get those colors.
Well, that's good. You didn't mess with the carpet though, huh? You didn't want to.
No. The carpet is a deep blue again. So, and my wife was indulgent to let me choose the colors for my office, even though dark colors tend to make a room smaller, I'm told. But royal blue has always been my favorite color. It's the Fantastic Four's original costumes, and Spidey and Superman and Thor, and so.
So what's that? Yeah, I think we're going to see the two of the pieces on the back wall, but I know the
Mhm.
top piece isn't in your set. So what is that?
Right. So one of my other lifelong interests, I am a musician. I play acoustic guitar and have since I was a kid. Because when I was 13 years old, I went on a mission trip to Haiti, and a 18-year-old brought along his guitar, and he sang and we played. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I started playing guitar, and that was also when I started shortly after buying CDs of my own. And always been a big fan of alternative Christian rock. And this is 2 album covers out of a set of 3 with a cowboy there, and there's a third one that's red. The artist is a guy named Jimmy Abeg, who's also a guitarist, a professional guitarist, and as well as a painter. And he painted one image and then photographed it and then repainted those photographs in 3 colors. And so this is 2 of the 3 that he still had available for sale last year. The albums came out around 1990. They're albums by another artist named Charlie Peacock that he's the guitarist for. The big original is owned by Amy Grant's ex-husband.
Oh, that's cool.
And I did contact him and inquired if he still had it, and he said that he did have it and he might consider selling it, but it was dear to him, so I haven't pursued that further. But at least I have these 2 out of the 3. It's called West Coast Diaries is the set.
Well, that's pretty cool. I mean, I was going to say, I hope you know where the third piece is. So obviously you do. That's a good thing.
Well, there's technically 2. There's a red one that's the third of this set, and then there's the original.
And the original, okay.
And I know where the original is. I'm not sure where the red one is. So.
Well, I'm sure you've got some keywords set up somewhere to potentially find them. Have you ever used? Because I actually have over with Google and Google's news service, I actually put keywords in over there related to the hobby and some artist names, and I sometimes get pings from that are actually worthwhile, surprisingly.
Okay.
It might be I'm sure it's one that most comic art collectors don't use.
No, I'm not aware of that.
But yes, you can. It was nice. I mean, I find stuff to put in CAF's news, every so often, at least once a month or twice a month. I see something that it's like, wow, that's actually newsworthy. And it's usually, ironically, it usually is something about a museum, but or a gallery show, something like that. So at least it is another resource for those people who collect.
You could do a little how-to video for us, like you do occasionally.
I could be giving away all the secrets, that other collectors have taught me over the years, because that is kind of part of the game, right? It's like figuring out your sources and
very much. Knowledge is power.
Exactly. I mean, that's why it's like you build your relationships in the hobby. You come up with as many shortcuts and alerts that you can get from. You better do that, Marcus. That in any place, whether it's eBay or CAF or any other service that's out there. But news services, I think, are overlooked. But yeah, they shouldn't be. So you want to start looking at some artwork, because there's a lot of good stuff in here, and I wanted to and pieces of like, well, I want to hear the story on how this one came about. So let's see here. So this is this first up. I have an affinity for ROM, so I'm clearly you do as well. So where did you get this one, and why did you pick up this piece?
Right. So Christmas 1980, my parents got me 3 comic books. One was ROM number 15, which is the culmination of a story where he prevents Brandy there from marrying evil dire wraith alien shapeshifter. One was Micronauts 26, which was Nick Fury, that I didn't know anything about, was prominently featured on the cover of that. And one was Star Wars 45 or 46, which was turned out it's the first one after they finished the Empire Strikes Back adaptation. And it had Luke battling a probe droid. And so ROM was one of the first I was trying to figure out. I asked my parents why they bought me comic books for Christmas, and they say they couldn't remember, but they think I asked for them, and they just picked some randomly off of a spinner rack that they thought would look cool to a 10-year-old boy. And it may be that I had already started reading my cousin's comics that I mentioned earlier, and that was why I asked her. Who knows what brought it about? But ROM was one of the first series I read, and at the time it was just sort of a fun science fiction series. And it turned out to be a good introduction to the Marvel universe, just because Marvel seemed to be using ROM as Marvel 2-in-1, because every issue seemed to have a C-level guest star like Jack of Hearts or Torpedo, who's a long-running character as sort of a ROM sidekick, as seen on panels 2 and 3 of this page. But later, as I got older and had more categories to put things in, I could sort of realize what they were doing with the ROM was he's essentially kind of Silver Surfer. He's a giant silver guy who had to leave his home planet to save it. And that got me thinking as I got older what the origin story of that was. And I came to wonder if Silver Surfer and ROM and the third character who fits that same story as Beta Ray Bill were sort of Vietnam metaphors about soldiers who went off to war and lost their family and their relationships and their humanity in the process.
Well, I mean, ROM was always just a cool book when it came out. I mean, and I loved Sal Buscema's work on it. And I mean, Joe Sinnott's ink on this page clearly, he makes everybody look better, right? But no, no, I agree. I mean, I think that because I have a page from issue 17 or 18, I forget which, when they were had the XMen in it. That was great. That was a good one. But yeah, no, I and I love it. And this is a nice 6-panel layout. And as far as a page goes, this is a pretty nice one.
I got this one from Ramita Man. Was my first purchase from him. And this page is in some ways a good exemplar of my collection, just because a lot of it is talkie panel pages.
Mm-hmm.
And a big splashy action posing page is more expensive, but I get just as much enjoyment out of a character page like this, and especially one that, for me, this page very much sums up the soap opera side of ROM. ROM has the action side where he's hunting aliens, but this is the whole soap opera side of the love triangle between ROM and Brandy and Steve, which the 2 panels that you've chosen here.
I know, I love the dialogue there. That's why Cripes, why doesn't Brandy just get down on her knees and propose to the Silver Spaceman?
Yeah.
You don't get better dialogue than that. I mean, that's high drama.
Yeah, very much so. And then the last panel of ROM and his RoboCop-esque, what's become of me? What have they done to me? Yeah, it's a very RoboCop kind of thing there. And RoboCop, I'd be curious to know when they started developing RoboCop compared to when ROM comic book came out.
I do not know, but Marcus might know. Marcus is our encyclopedia in the chat. But yeah, I loved ROM, and definitely appreciated Sal's work on the book. And I think he's no longer underrated, but I think for the longest time Sal just wasn't. I mean, there were people that loved his work, but there weren't a lot. And now today I feel like he's definitely well loved and respected by
Go back to that for one more second, because I have one more thing to say, and I say this on my page. But panels 2 and 3, that's Torpedo lying on the couch, and there's an interesting notation in the margin that asks them to add that bandage to his head. And I realized that's because if you were a new reader, you wouldn't understand why he's just hanging out on the couch being lazy. But the bandage makes it clear that he's wounded, and that's why he's doing that. So
the editor
yes.
They make sure. Marcus says the ROM toy was around longer. So there you go. I did not. Did I? I can't remember. I had a $6 Million Man. I don't remember if I ever got a ROM.
Yeah, I never had a ROM. I had some Micronauts.
I had those. It wasn't the Micronauts. It was whatever that other toy line was that was like Micronauts. They kind of made it almost. They were clearly hacking and copying some of the toy designs from that. But I had those. I didn't get Micronauts, sadly.
I did have one of those big Shogun Warriors.
Oh yeah.
The 15 inch or however 18 inch maybe Shogun Warriors. So that was fun. my friends would each get a different one, and so we could bash them against each other.
That's exactly what they were intended for, right?
Yes.
Rock'em sock'em robots.
Yes. Very much.
Oh man, Shogun Warriors. Yeah, that's what #1 Marvel fan says. Well, next piece, let's see here. So this one is we've got Kurt Swan and Murphy Anderson. It's from Action Comics 422.
That's right. So this is the one that the actual issue was in my older cousin's collection from the 1970s that was out in his house, and he went off first to college and then to the army, and left his comics behind, I guess, undefended. And I and his two younger brothers, 10 years his junior, found them and were fascinated by them and read through them repeatedly. And it was almost all early DC, a few Charlton, horror and sci-fi, and I think there was like one Avengers. So I didn't really know anything about Marvel, but these Superman comics, which were mostly Superman. It was Superboy in action and Superman in adventure. So this was a memorable story just because Carrie Bates was doing these amusing mashups. This story is a 50% takeoff on The Fugitive and 50% takeoff on The Boy in the Bubble, because that boy who's holding that laser gun there has this disease that turns his white blood cells giant, and you can see one of them busting through the window there.
I love that first panel too. That with him flying through the city. I mean, that's great. I mean, that's really nice.
This is one where I was still getting very educated about the marketplace and not understanding why some pages were going for more than others. Because I picked up maybe at least half a dozen, maybe not quite a dozen pages from the Swan Anderson stuff, and I couldn't understand why some of the pages were going for more than others, because I didn't have the view of, oh, this has the main figure and he's posing this certain way and takes up so much of the page. I was attracted to this one. This was a nostalgia piece, but I was like, oh, this was a fun story, and the fact that it was signed by Julius Schwartz is kind of amusing, but then the other two guys signing it too, that's great. And Superman's in an action pose, and I now recognize those as things that people use that when they're valuing these pages, but it wasn't at all on my radar when I got it.
Yeah, no, I like the signatures as well. I mean, you'd prefer they don't sign it in the art, but these aren't so bad. I mean, the foot of the bed, that's all right. Kurt Swan's and Murphy Anderson's in the last panel. Big
white space.
Yeah. But yeah, that is true. I mean, it is definitely like you were saying, trying to understand why certain pages from the same issue go for more, and it's always typically stuff like that, right? It's either a pivotal moment or a strong pose.
There was one I was looking at that went in this set of lots 1 week where I was really hoping to get it because it was from a story that I remembered, but it went what I thought was outrageously high. But the reason was it had Clark in the broom closet opening his shirt, revealing his Superman insignia.
Exactly.
Which I now realize, it's not like there's 100 of those.
Right. Green Lantern saying his oath. That one's always going to be, 2 or 3 times, whatever, another page from the same issue might be. I bought, I showed that Werner Roth piece that I got on the CAF update last Thursday. And initially when I was showing the piece, I didn't want it because I was like, the lower left panel has Juggernaut from behind, full figure, but all you see is his butt and his back and nothing else. And I was just like, if Juggernaut were facing me, I wouldn't hesitate on this. And then I thought about it and I thought, if Juggernaut was facing it, it would probably be another, $500, $800. I'm probably better off knowing, not having him face it. So I'll take it for what it is. But those decisions that, do come into play when you're trying to weigh the value versus is it going to make you happy?
Yeah, this is the Morlock ethos. I'm happier to have at this point in my career, and I understand people apparently go through phases in their collecting as well, and maybe I'm just at the the pupa phase or something, and we'll have a different set of values 5 or 10 years from now. Who knows?
Well, you'll definitely be more savvy. That's the thing. You look for
Mhm.
all those, because as buyers, we always have to, you always want to make sure you're buying something that you can resell for the same amount. So you're always going to be looking for those elements. I mean, sometimes you just buy it because you got to, right? I mean, I'm sure that Swan Anderson
Yes.
page, you had to buy it because it was nostalgic for so many reasons.
Yes.
So that always happens. But those other ones where you could say, yeah, I could wait for another one. And you really have to weigh it.
Yes.
Make sure that you're not overspending on stuff because
Yeah.
it's
Well.
those are the toughest lessons to learn as a new collector.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and you see that at like I feel good at least that I've acquired enough knowledge to say, I don't know, sit in the auction at Heroes Con and say that is a very nice piece, but for the amount it's currently being bid for, you could get ... and to have actually something to put into that ...
Mhm.
that makes me
Exactly.
feel okay about letting a piece that I really like go by.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, but again, it takes time. It's not learned,
Mhm.
overnight. And I do think that
That's right.
a lot of fledgling collectors get burned,
Yes.
in different ways. I mean, it's either overspending, mistakes made when you're commissioning artists, those sorts of things, and they get, sometimes, and especially you don't have that support network, which most new collectors don't have. It's easy to see a lot of people walk away from it, just
Mm.
early. I mean, it happens. Definitely, it happens. I got discouraged a lot early on, but I persevered.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Likewise. I know. And the Dunning-Kruger curve, right? You immediately think you acquire great expertise, and then you then start to quickly realize how big the ocean is.
right. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. No. It's so true. And but I mean, but the good thing is today, gosh, it's so different, than 20 years ago. At least, there's so many Facebook groups
mhm.
out there.
Yes.
You've got your Morlock group, and
Yes.
and there's so many private chats with 20 or 30 people in them where they're supporting each other and helping them find things. And if they don't buy something, they pass it on to the rest of the group. So there's so many outlets,
Yes.
to make sure you don't make those mistakes that many of us made early on.
Yes. I'm glad those networks are out there for us who are still getting our feet wet, as it were.
That's true. And Rich Danny's, I actually went and did some research on Bilal artwork. Now I know I don't own any because it's so very expensive. I've probably seen a few pieces by him, and then just realized it's just so far out of my reach that I'll never own it. But it was interesting to go and do the research, and some of that happens. Robert, I'm sure there's probably some artists and pieces and things that you'd love to have in your collection, but you realize it's just out of your wheelhouse
Yep.
right now, right?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Because just like everyone else, I've enjoyed Watchmen, right? But
Yes.
for what it would cost to get a Watchmen page, there's a lot of other things that I also like. That I
Exactly.
could have 50 pages.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, you can have 50 Morlock pages for each Watchman, or
yes.
even more.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
by today's standard, it's probably more like 70, I'd say,
Yeah.
maybe 80. But
Yeah.
but it's true. I mean, there'll always be stuff like that. But like with Watchmen, it's like, well, maybe you can get something nice by Gibbons that and there wouldn't be a lot, but maybe you just get one of those easy sketches where he's drawing Rorschach, right? That's that
Yeah.
he did so many of. If that's all I can own, maybe it's going to cost me
Mhm.
$400, $600 to just have that one thing. It might even be noted to Robert on it, but if that's the only thing I can own, then so be it,
Yeah.
because a Watchman page is not in my future.
That's right. Exactly.
So let's see here. Why don't we go? We're sticking with some DC stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
we've got this is Sikowski.
no. This
Oh, did I
is
skip to everyone? This is Kirby Coletta. I'm sorry. Yeah, I had it numbered wrong. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is, of course, Fourth World from Jimmy Olsen. My cousin did have a one or two Jimmy Olsen, not this particular issue, but this was probably the first Kirby I ever saw was Fourth World stuff, and not knowing anything about all the history that went into it, just as a kid, as just the big monster. It was the one with, I forget, Jimmy Olsen was fighting. There was this giant pink monster that looked sort of like the Thing in the issue I had, but this one is fun because I got this was one of the first pieces that I really stretched to get. I would suppose. because as an early collector, I said, oh, I remember Kirby, and I remember Kirby as a kid, and now I understand the significance of Kirby as well. And so a fourth world piece would be fun. I had one I was talking to at a dealer, and he turned out to have already sold that one, but he said, well, let me see what else I can come up with, and made me an offer on this one, which I was happy to take. At the time, not even really understanding the whole issue of how Kirby's Supermen were being redrawn. And after I got the page and had it for a while, it's when I realized that you can see in that panel on the right that what I assume is Kirby's pencils were left underneath Plastino or whoever redrew the face. Which is curious, but you can see the hair and the line of his cheek in Kirby's blocky style that he was using at the time. And so, yeah, a lot of those DC pages that era, the Superman logos on both Superman and Supergirl seem to have often required fixing, as this one did.
Well, Kirby liked to be a little expressive, probably, with the way he approached Superman.
Yeah. But this one's got, it's got the cool machine there. Got some Kirby tech. And so this is a fun page to have. And again, it's not it's not an action page. Most of my collection is kind of between the action pages, but still art that offers something fun to look at.
Yeah, no, I mean, Kirby stuff is always going to be desirable, and the good thing is there's so much out there, right? But there are affordable pages out there, so I'm glad you got this one.
Yeah, I'm happy, and it's one where I've been able to. It's a conversation piece, right? You take it to a convention, and somebody who's didn't even know that Kirby pages existed to be looked at in person, but enjoyed his work, can see one, and again, sharing the pleasure is the people who've seen me at a convention know that I come with a loaded portfolio and just enjoying it with people.
Yes, indeed. And we saw that portfolio at Heroes.
Yes.
Scott Wingo says Jude looks like Mannix to me. He does kind of have a Mannix kind of face, doesn't he? Yeah. But it is very nice. I mean, the top panel is just awesome. Doesn't matter if somebody else had to rework the S on there. You get everything else about Kirby that you want to get out of a page.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that Superman in the bottom right panel is totally untouched Kirby. Granted, it's super small and sketchy, but without having been tinkered with by the editorial powers that be.
And Mickey agrees it's a nice Kirby one as well.
Thank you, Mickey. Love your Legion pages, Mickey.
We all love Mickey's Legion pages.
Yes.
Man, he has one heck of a collection. So, I mean, was that your first Kirby, or did you have others before?
Yes, it's my only Kirby.
Oh, it's your only Kirby. Okay.
But I thought I had a different first Kirby. It turned out the profiles in history had a fake Kirby that I ended up as the owner of, which was what led me into the community in one way, because I got onto the CGC forum to ask about it, and was able to receive some education that helped me to become convinced that it was indeed a fake Kirby that had made its way into the collection of the guy who had passed on, and his collection was being auctioned by Profiles in History, and I'm sure he thought it was a real Kirby. But someone on CAF actually was able to direct me to the likely image that had been lightboxed for the pose, and it was very convincing to me that Kirby would not have done my image. It was looked like maybe a convention piece. It was just a single character piece with no background, was the one that I had gotten, that turned out to be a fake. And that was also the beginning of my education about why getting published pages is safer than getting things that claim to be convention sketches.
That is very true. So how did that situation work out, though? Did you go back to Profiles and?
No, it was quite some time after, and I just wrote it. I just kept it as a conversation piece of this looks like Kirby, but you can look like Kirby and not be Kirby. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's unfortunate, but it happens. I mean, and typically, uh, with regards to forgeries, it usually falls on the art dealer or the auction house to kind of be the one that ends up you know catching it, right? I mean, I've got a couple of fake McFarlanes next to me that Mike had gotten from somebody, and he just gave them to me. He's like, burn them, shoot them full of holes, whatever you want to do with them. I've had it for almost 20 years, and every time I see him, I get angry, And I remember when Anthony got his fake Rob Liefeld, that he took that to a shooting range and shot it up. So, but it's true. I mean, that's it's something that it happens a lot, and it's funny, but it's nice. I mean, you're not going to be passing that on to anybody.
No,
it's onto it. It's sometimes collectors, aren't as honest and kind of figure a way to move it on so they don't lose their money in it. Unfortunately, because it does happen.
No, I wouldn't enjoy that. That's I'm willing to eat the lesson, and now it's a conversation piece.
Yes. Yeah, Rich says wrap fish with them. I haven't decided what to do with the McFarlanes yet, but I don't know. We'll maybe as a group, maybe I'll bring them to OAX and we'll figure out how we want to dispose of them there. Yeah, Marcus says, good thing I don't have any problem with my vast Bob Kane sketch collection. Here, Marcus. I can't tell you, because I curate some of the stuff from eBay that comes over, and every week I'm kicking out fake Bob Kanes, because or even if they're questionable, I kick it out anyway. It's just like it's not even worth trying to feature a Bob Kane, even if it looks legit, or it's being sold by someone who I consider to be knowledgeable that they probably have a legit one. I still don't feature it. Bob Kane is off the radar as far as eBay goes.
Yeah, no, it's understandable why.
Yep.
It's some artists, I guess they benefited during their productive career from that, and then the payback comes decades later, I guess.
True. And Alex Johnson does make a good point here where he says, I hope you wrote that story on the back of the piece or in some way on it, because you never know if something would happen to you. It could actually make its way back out there. And it stinks, but it is what it is, because you just hate to see those kinds of pieces out there. And we see it on eBay all the time, and not just with the Bob Kanes, but because there's a particular seller out there today that is listing things like 20 pieces every single week, with a Stanley drawing. And I can't even remember, right? But fortunately I can spot them, when I'm going through it, but they don't even look that good. We used to always have problems with Calvin and Hobbes and Charles Schultz.
Peanuts,
Yep, exactly. Those have kind of, fallen the wayside for other pieces that people just feel they can, forge. But anyway, Marcus just mentioned Charles Schultz too.
Yeah, there's a Doctor Who episode written by Douglas Adams where Doctor Who finds that this guy is funding his scientific experiments by having gone back in time to get a bunch of fake Mona Lisas painted, a bunch of duplicates. And so Doctor Who goes back in time and writes, "This is a fake" on all the boards.
Well, there you go. That it has to be done one way or another. If you're not going to dispose of it, it's just got to be done, because it will make its way back into circulation somehow, some way. If it's not taken care of, unfortunately.
That's a good point. I'll do my diligence to help out the collection community.
Why do that if you? Marcus says, "Why do that if you can go back in time, buy stock?" So I don't know. You're right, Marcus. I mean, but Mona Lisa was probably one of the more expensive pieces at the time that story was written, and it just seemed like the right way to go. So let's keep looking here, because I think now we've got the piece I thought we were going to look at.
Right. Okay. So Broderick was drawing Micronauts at the time. I started collecting, and I discovered as a kid that an artist has a style, and you can notice when he goes to a different comic book. And when he popped up on Firestorm the Nuclear Man, or when he popped up in Legion of Superheroes, I was able to, even as a kid, start recognizing, oh, this is the same guy. He's just drawing a different comic book now. This was one of a pair of pages. I forget. I got one of them on eBay and one of them on, I forget where, Heritage or maybe eBay, and was able to reunite two pages that had been separated by time, as all pages had, and so that made me feel happy to have two consecutive pages. And of course, block there is the Ben Grimm of the Legion of Superheroes, essentially, except he has full fingers on each hand.
Yeah, no, I've always liked Pat Broderick stuff, and I got to meet him at MegaCon last year for the first time. So yeah, he's in the Florida, Orlando area, I believe. But no, this is cool, and I don't think I own sequential pages for anything. I have to go back and look. I don't think so, but that's always fun though. Does it give you the idea that maybe you could get a third or a fourth in order?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of as Monopoly, right? If you own, two of the three colors, wouldn't you like to build a hotel?
Oh, of course.
And Broderick was at Heroes last year, and I got him to contribute to an X-Men jam I was working on, and I started a Micronauts jam this last year in hopes of him being a part of it, but then he wasn't able to make it to Heroes this year, so it's going forward without him.
Well, this is a good one, and I see a couple people suggested the Viking Funeral, TAMD1 and Tim Finney. Feeling that's the way to go, and it probably probably is the right thing to do. But no, this is cool. This is nice, and congrats on getting consecutive pages.
Thank you. Yes,
I think a lot of people can go through their entire collecting careers and not be able to do that unless they buy them at the same time. And they're buying them new off of a rep or something like that, and they get lucky. But that's awesome.
Well, in the Morlock world, it's more feasible. Getting consecutive, Cockrum first run X-Men or something. That's not
so you're saying the Pat Broderick we just looked at was a Morlock page?
Yes.
Yes. It was. Definitely falls into that territory, huh? All right.
Yeah, and I would get more from that book if they came, if I saw them. So.
Mm-hmm. Let's see here. So I wouldn't mind one of these pages here. So let's take a look at this. Bill Sienkiewicz, New Mutants from 1982. Yeah,
so this was a nice mix of something I remember from childhood, plus a esteemed artist. And I would love to hear the story of why he doesn't do layouts anymore, because he's pretty much just an inker for most of his career now, and yet his layouts are wonderful. Well,
I don't know. I know he's working much larger now. When I had him on that one show back in, gosh, it was November or so, but it's almost a year ago. But he talked about just liking to work on the panels on a much larger scale. So he doesn't even do work on 11x17 anymore. So I don't know. I don't think he. I think he said something about he felt he could be more gestural with the larger stuff, and working 11x17 just doesn't fit his. I don't know. It's not in his DNA any longer.
Yeah, Nick Bitar is doing that as well, right? On his recent X-Wielder John, the 3 tiers, each of them is a landscape 11x17. So altogether, it's 33 by.
Yeah, they're huge.
To make, on these pages. But I just enjoy looking at and now understanding that what Sienkiewicz was doing in New Mutants was drawing in multiple influences, but including a lot of early 20th century advertising art.
Oh,
like that second panel there of Amara seems surely referenced from a fashion plate of some sort.
Well, he was definitely influenced by fashion design at the time. I mean, that's kind of you see it, right? And I think he even did some fashion related work as part of in some parts of his career, and so it shows. But yeah, I mean, getting a New Mutants page would be high on my wish list. It always has been. I just any page that how do you find a Morlock page that's from this run? There aren't many.
No, this one. Yeah, no, this one was not a Morlock page. This one was a little more of a stretch. I think at Heritage, maybe. I forget where it popped up in a quarterly, probably. auction. But as a kid, this was certainly one of the artists who was, breaking the Marvel house style in the early 80s and made it a lot more interesting. And I, as someone who was in the early 80s, that's when that transition was occurring. And people like Broderick and Byrne and Sienkiewicz and Perez were generating work that was clearly different looking from Sal Buscema and Ramita from the 70s.
Sure. No, but I'm envious. I've always wanted to get a New Mutants page, and I would be happy with this. Is that if that was my one example,
Yeah,
I'd be happy. So yeah, congrats on that.
Exactly, and that's my thoughts on this one as well. I feel sated.
Heck yeah. I mean, but see, that's like that Paul Smith X-Men page. I mean, they're just so darn hard to come by. But that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
And I like it because it's early in the run, and I'm told he injured his hand at some point and had to draw left-handed from some point on for a while. And I'd be curious to hear him say more about that, and when that transition occurred, because certainly his style evolved over the course of his run on New Mutants.
It definitely did, without question. Yeah, well, we agreed that we were going to do a future show. I can tell you that. He is so busy right now. He skipped a couple shows and everything in the last 8-10 months. So I don't know when I'll be able to get him to come back on, but we can make sure to ask him that, Robert.
Yeah,
I've not heard that before.
Yeah. So, and maybe it's an urban myth that he can put to rest, or maybe he can dish on the details of the when and the how.
Exactly. Now, next up, another piece I wouldn't mind owning myself: an Art Adams, Terry Austin, New Mutants special edition page from '85. Again, great team up. Austin with Adams was Adam Austin made a lot of people look really good, but this is a nice pairing.
Yeah, and I love, of course, the detail. This has the nostalgia for me. This was from toward the end of my run as a child of buying comics, because 1986 was when I got the CD player. This was 1985. And Art Adams, of course, is another example of an artist coming onto the scene there in the 80s, totally overturning the Marvel 70s house style and really setting what we now know as the Image style. But spending much more time on it than any of them did, because he was, working at a glacial pace by the standards of the day to produce these pages. It's got the whole team there in the middle panel, which I love, and it's funny. It's like one of my other interests is live theater. I just got back from seeing the Back to the Future show with my family in Manhattan.
How was that?
Last weekend? It was great. It was a lot of fun. Good fun songs and some cool special effects, and I'm glad that story is getting another lease on life through that. I know one of the actor who's playing Biff is in the production is a friend of mine, and he was telling me how excited he was to get to talk with Huey Lewis for half an hour at the debut. But what you see in the middle panel is a funny conceit that you also see in theater, which is all of the characters facing you while talking to each other, which isn't how any of us do it in real life, but that's what we want to see, right? And if you look on a comic book's cover, that's one of the problems they always have to solve, is how can I have all these characters fighting each other, but you're seeing all their fronts and not their backs, but like on your Juggernaut page.
Right, exactly. I remember I don't remember what it was. I just remember seeing a cover and the character was, the lead character wasn't facing, and I'm like, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does that, because it was so glaring to see it that it was almost shocking. But that's funny.
Another couple things I like about this page. One is that Ilyana is holding the sword in her left hand, which is a detail that I appreciate. Art Adams does not always draw her left-handed, nor did Sienkiewicz. But I like it when they do, because it's not the default. It's a choice that you make. You would assume that somebody's right-handed, and so to make her left-handed, first of all, there's that ancient connotation of left-handed means sinister, means devious, and so Illyana is the the edgy member of the team. But just to have it be a distinguishing character point that she's not like the others in being right-handed. So I like that about that one panel.
TMD one, yes, it is Terry Austin inks on this one.
Yes. And then also, this is a page with lots of different characters on it, which, of course, Art Adams mainly does covers now, and most of his covers are half-figure, single-character covers. Although somebody posted a super nice group shot of Valkyrie fighting a bunch of monsters today on one of the Facebook forums by Art Adams. Yes, there's a lot of 80s stuff here. There's a Beat It towel. There's a Big Country towel. But he did a really nice job on this page of giving each character a distinct face.
Yeah, no, this is nice. I've always wanted something by Art Adams from any of his X-Men work, whether some of the New Mutants or an Uncanny or an annual, and haven't gotten lucky yet.
Yeah, and having that one definitely sates again my having an Art Adams. I don't feel like I need to look for an Art Adams at this point.
Exactly. So one and done. I mean, those are always the good ones when maybe something will come along later that but you're at least content. That's hard to. As a collector, that's a really hard place to get to.
I can think of one other Art Adams page for nostalgia purposes, perhaps, that if it came up, I would seriously think about going for, but not just to have an Art Adams page. So.
Well, this is change of pace here. We're going to look at Alex Roth.
Yes.
Yeah, from 2006, from Justice.
Right. So late 90s, I had been out of comic books for almost 15 years. And actually, the son of my pastor was a college student who lent me a copy of the Kingdom Come trade paperback. And that was the first place I ever heard of Alex Ross. I didn't know anything about 90s comics or hadn't heard of him, of course, who had arisen in the mid 90s. And hey, Mikhail. And I had no idea about what Kingdom Come was about thematically, that it had to do with 90s comics, that it was a criticism of the sorts of comics that had become popular and was looking back to a different sort of style. But I knew that Alex Ross made really gorgeous comics, and so that got him on my radar, but also got comic books back on my radar of saying, oh, it's not just that stuff that I remember reading when I was in junior high, but there's actually something interesting that is entertaining and thoughtful to look at. So this is, of course, a Justice page, not a Kingdom Come page. But this was, of course, Alex Ross has done very few runs because his work takes forever to do. And so for him to commit to a 12-issue series was a pretty big deal. And the fact that essentially the theme of it is Legion of Doom versus the Super Friends. It's Challenge of the Super Friends, right? The cartoon. Is the theme of that whole series, and that was one that I had grown up, and so seeing that committed to page so lovingly by Alex Ross was fun. So this page shows Giganta breaking into the hospital, posing as a nurse, trying to finish off the Atom.
Yeah, it's a really nice page. I mean, I've looked at Alex's stuff in the past. Again, he's one of those people I haven't seen a page that I want to get yet, but I'd love to have something from him in my collection.
Yeah.
I'd even take just some rough pencils, right? I mean, I like that Earth X stuff that page that Mike had with in the last Dueling Dealers. When I saw that, I was like, well, if that doesn't sell, maybe I'll see if I can get that, because it's just fun, and it just, if you want to have a starting piece at the very least, I mean, something like that would be pretty cool to have.
Yeah. So some people I know prefer a more cartoony style, because Alex Ross, of course, uses a lot of photo reference, and so the people have human proportions instead of superhuman proportions. But I'm just fine with that. It's a different choice, and I think it's just as valid a choice as everybody having tiny heads.
Sure. So back to the X-Men here. This is John Cassaday from Astonishing X-Men.
Right. So my favorite character as a kid was Kitty Pryde. She was the audience point of view character in X-Men in the early 80s, and it worked for me that she was the character that I felt the most interested in to see what was going to happen to her. She was the same age I were. And so when Joss Whedon did his run on X-Men and made her the focal character, this was, of course, a couple years after I had heard about Kingdom Come and was looking around to see if there were any interesting comics, and seeing that Joss Whedon, whom I knew from Buffy, had done a run on X-Men. I was definitely going to check out and see what that was. And then to see that he had made Kitty Pryde the central character, is all of Buffy made much more sense once I realized that Kitty was his favorite character too, because of this 24 issue run he did on Astonishing X-Men was basically all about her. And so getting one of his pages with her, and of course John Cassaday did this terrific landscape style art. I understand Cassaday has a cinematography background, so he thinks in widescreen. And as you see here, it's 5 widescreen panels with Kitty bursting through the floor to try to help her team. But this is also interesting from a historical viewpoint, because coloring had gotten good by this time. I forget exactly what year this was. It's 2003 or 4 or something, I think. And of course, coloring in the 90s, the computer color didn't really know how to do it well. But by this time, they had really figured it out. And Laura Martin did an amazing job coloring this whole book. And so watching the dance between the penciler, the inker, and now the colorist became an interesting thing. And we all know lots of pages today on which much of the heavy lifting is done by the colorist.
Yeah, no, very true. I really enjoyed these stories from Astonishing X-Men, and I like John's artwork a lot, and the coloring was pretty good. I remember all the covers to those issues were just so striking.
Yeah.
I did actually own one of the covers, and I sold it. But I don't remember which issue. It was the one where Emma Frost had her hands over Cyclops' visor,
right.
And you see like the glowing between her fingers.
Right.
But you don't see that in the art, but the cover was just so darn cool. The way they had done it. So very nice.
Yeah.
Now here's somebody I'd love to own something from as well.
Yes. So again, a Kitty Pryde page, and this is one where I don't know. Manara is an artist I didn't even know existed before I started collecting. I probably saw him on CAF or something, or I don't remember exactly how I became aware that he existed. European artists don't, especially of that generation, don't have a whole lot to do with the superhero world. And indeed, this isn't a costume superhero page. They got him. It's sort of like probably Dave McKean, right? He did Arkham Asylum with Grant Morrison, even though he hates superheroes, but he did Batman in such a way that it worked within his aesthetic. And here we have Milo Manara doing X-Men, but the story that Chris Claremont wrote involves them out of costume and in fact without powers for most of the story. And so here the artist sort of having joined a rural living society here for a little while. And the background figures, I think, on this are wonderful. Of course, Manara is well known for his female figures, and we do get 3 of those. But I mean, look at those kids in that middle tier. Just so fun.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful piece. And it was funny. I was drawn to the kids in the second panel too. It's just like, wow, just not what you're used to seeing when you're thinking about a superhero story. Characters in the background. You get the pigs, you get the little children. I mean, really nicely done. Yeah.
Or in that lower tier, there's the 2 main figures, which is Kitty Pryde is sick with a fever, and the leader of this colony is trying to, I don't know what he's doing, trying to make her feel better. But then there's that other guy out the door on the far left who doesn't add anything to the story, but he's just a great little figure that puts life in the background.
Yeah, no, this is great. Now, is this something you've recently picked up, or how long have you had this one?
I got this one last year, maybe. This one came from Heritage. Okay. I took this to Lake Como so I could get his picture with it. That's kind of a thing I like to do, is to, when possible, to get a photo of the artist with, and I put that in the additional images section on CAF.
Okay.
And I was able to get this one with him. I had actually gotten a couple of 70s Manara pages on Heritage cheap, because they're smaller and they're not the beautiful woman figure, but it's like just men riding a horse or something. And I took them to Lake Como also, but his agent advised me not to show them to him because there was apparently some shenanigans where he lost control of that art in the past, and it's a sore point for him. So I was glad that he told me that, of course, because the last thing you want to do is upset the artist.
Right.
And so, but I had also brought that XWomen page, and he said, "Oh yes, this is because they had brought some of Manara's more recent work there to sell." He's like, "No, you have a better page than anything we have here." Okay, well, good. I'm glad his dealer thinks so.
Right. That's great. Well, hey, at least he steered you clear of making that kind of a mistake. Yeah. But I mean, artists can't be happy with everything they've ever done, whether some contractual reasons that does it, or it's their early work, they're not happy with it. But that's, you've got a great piece there in that Manera, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Now this next one, stunning. Right. Love the the way the panels are done on the backs of the buildings there. I mean, this is just crazy beautiful, but only as J.H. Williams can do, right? I mean, he's phenomenal.
And I wondered if this was inspired by Neil Adams did a panel in X-Men with Sauron, and his wings were spread, and there were panels on the veins of his wings.
No.
And or who knows, maybe it was Eisner or somebody else. But yeah, just the layout on this alone was what drew me. I got this off of his website, and again, this is typical for my collection in some ways. This is a page from Batwoman, but you wouldn't know it. There's no Batwoman on this page. It's a page from a story in which Batwoman teams up with Wonder Woman, and there's no Wonder Woman on this page. And of course, those are two figures that would have made either of which would have made the page more expensive, but not necessarily better, right? I think this is beautiful, and because it didn't contain the main figures who were theoretically the stars of the book, it was affordable.
Well, I was going to say that's what made it a Morlock page, right? Because it didn't have any any main character on it, but it doesn't take anything away from it. It's a wonderful image, and I mean, and it's smart too, just the way those panels are done on the backs of the buildings. I just love that. Yeah,
the buildings are cool. The interesting thing about how the tree is rendered in stark black and white instead of being ink wash like the rest of the page, giving it sort of the mixing of the styles there. And Williams is brilliant at mixing styles. If anyone's read his book Echo Lands, where every one of the main characters is done in the style of a different artist, is really cool. If you haven't seen that, you should check that out. In the printed version, a halter top was added to Medusa for not Comics Code, but for whatever proprietary reasons they felt were appropriate. And that was digitally done. Or like that face on the top of 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth panel over. There's that weird group of faces on top in the antenna.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Just lots of love went into this page, and that's what I like, is seeing the artists do something that they seem to be having a good time with.
Well, clearly, and there were several DPSs that came out of his run on these stories, and they're all just mind blowing.
Yes,
the amount of detail and care that he put in those. I mean, the ink wash. I mean, it's stunning, absolutely stunning.
Yeah, there are not a lot of artists of whom I would say the best thing about their work is the layout, and when even just the panels are this beautiful, that's really, I think, saying something, that the layout is even more compelling than the individual panels when they're like this.
Right. Let's see here. Next piece is this one is Jeremy Bastian.
Right.
I mean, you don't see too many of these out there.
Yeah, there can't be many because his work is so meticulous. And this was a CAF Live, not CAF Live, but a CAF pickup during one of your biannual events.
So was it it was during the Comic Art Live, huh? That's great.
It was. Yeah, okay. That's Comic Art Live. Yes. Okay. Yes, it was during that. Someone put this up, and I had him on one of my keywords because I had run across him again. Someone I didn't even know was alive or doing art or anything about when I started collecting 5 years ago. All of these guys, almost all of these, I didn't know who J.H. Williams was. I didn't know who J.H. Williams was or that Bastian was, but their art is just amazing. And this one has detail that you can't even. He puts more work into it. It's kind of like you hear about a craftsman and he builds something where there's a part on the inside that no one will ever see, but he knows it's there and he wants it to look right. Like if you look on the bottom left panel on the page, there's a guy leaning against a barrel. But if you were able to zoom in, you would realize that this whole page and this whole pirate ship is bee themed, and there's a beehive on that barrel and a bunch of bees embedded in that wood that you can't see without probably a magnifying glass.
Wow. I mean, I love his work. I mean, are there really? I mean, I don't think there's a lot of interiors out there, published stuff from him. I've seen mostly commissions and things from him, but yeah, he's just an amazing talent. And I know he works really slow and he's very meticulous, but
yes.
Gosh, I think maybe even one of the first pieces I ever saw from him was one that Benno had picked up. I don't even remember when that was. It was probably, I mean, it's been a while, but again, that's awesome that you have a page by. I'd love to get just a small illustration by Jeremy, and I'd be pretty happy.
Yeah, I love his stuff, and happy that I was able to get a page. He has a Patreon, but it's full at the tier that where he gives you any art. And this is a series that I'm just amazed you don't hear more talk about, just because it's really neat. Maybe it's because it's not finished, or I don't know why, but I feel like when I'm trying to show people that comic books can be worth their time, Cursed Pirate Girl is one of the ones that I show them, and they invariably love it. And I've given away probably half a dozen copies of the trade paperback.
So you're doing your good thing for the hobby by converting some people. That's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's an easy sell. I mean, it's fun. It's beautiful. And I'm glad I got a page, I guess, before everyone else realizes that they should have one too.
No, you definitely lucked out.
Yeah,
a lot.
So
it seems like every year more and more people you get turned on to his work. So, deservedly so. I mean, he's a very unique talent doing sequential storytelling.
Yeah.
Now this one is a real big change of pace. This is a illustration art piece from 1939.
Yes. So, and this is, again, my interest is not in comic book art per se, even though I did read plenty of comic book art, but I like just plain art as well. And so if I see a piece, I think not this one, but another piece by this artist, Fortunino Matania, was another one I picked up at a CAF Live, I believe. And just looking through the offerings, I was like, oh, that's a really nice piece of art. Who is this guy? And what is this from? Oh, it's from the 1930s. Really? Wow, that's cool. And he was a magazine illustrator. He's Italian, but his work was published in British magazines. It apparently was the case. And his studio was full of antique furniture that he used for reference. He did a lot of Roman stuff. He also did some John Carter of Mars stuff that was genre. And this is a good example of using toned paper, and the benefits of using a paper that's not white is that then you can use white ink to make things shine. This is a great example of that technique.
Yeah, it feels very much like some kind of like an etching, or using some kind of ink plate. But it's gorgeous. It's really nice. Where'd you pick up something like this?
I think this came up on Heritage, actually, maybe in one of the illustration auctions, because I started watching more than just the comic book auctions, being aware that there's stuff I like at other places. And I think this is sort of a Rockwellian piece, because everybody has very strong facial expressions, and it's called Goldoni's Christmas Dinner. And I think what's going on here is that the guy on the left is Goldoni, and he's invited the local parish priest to dinner for some reason, and there's some kind of power play going on between the two of them. So it's sort of a comedy of manners sort of thing we see here, and the maid looking on there at these two guys posturing at each other.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful illustration. Rich Danny's mentions that Williamson and Schultz are huge fans of them as well.
Yeah, Williamson, I could certainly see him, and Mark Schultz for that matter. Yeah, both of those guys make sense with their love of illustration art.
Yeah, no, really nice. I can say I don't think we've shown anything quite like this before in an interview that we've done. So I'm glad you brought it. You know, you had a lot of art to choose from. So this is great.
Earlier this year, there was a huge art dump done on Heritage by the Franklin Mint. You know, it makes the decorative plates and calendars and things. And I picked up quite a few pieces in that at ridiculously low prices to put in on the walls in the new office space that we're building, and just to have in my collection. And so, yeah, trying to, I guess, zig when other people zag. You can get some nice things.
I tend to miss those illustration ones. It stinks because I swear I'm on all the right email lists when they do the announcements, but I tend to find out about them when my editor writes the weekly recap, and I missed out on another illustration auction because I'd like to just look, right, and see what's there, even if I'm not interested in buying it. But I don't know how Heritage has a very unique way of like you categorizing the PR that they push out, and I don't know how you edit it, because I remember I've asked them about it before, and they're like, "Oh, we'll fix that for you," or we'll change that. And I still feel like I don't get any of the illustration auction PR pieces ever.
Well, I wonder, like, if you even just like put in a low bid, a tracking bid early on something, if that would put you on their database radar, and they would start pushing things to you.
It might be that. But I just think there's like a granular thing they have there because of all the different categories they go across, that then even art is broken up into separate categories. Yes. So there's certain things that you're not going to get, like animation art, maybe you might miss out on when they do one of those, or manga, anime, whatever. That you have to. There's got to be a preference setting somewhere on their site to fix that. But maybe I'll have to ask, and I'll educate everybody. But here's a piece that we were talking about a couple times earlier. This is a jam piece.
Right. So this is the thing. I discovered the existence of jam pieces as a newbie collector, I think, on Anthony's site, and he had a couple that were incomplete jams that he was selling, that I bought and finished out at Heroes Con last year, and that was satisfying. But there's a learning curve to learning how to do this, I found, and you can't really get too many at one show. If you're going to have it on the same piece of paper, and you want the artist to do a good job, and you don't want them to feel pressured, and you don't want to feel pressured, because my first Heroes Con, I realized now that I hovered too much near the artists, because I wanted them to do their part on a jam piece so that I could then take it to someone else that agreed to do another part. And so I learned from that experience and said, okay, you need to play the long game. If you're going to do a multi-artist jam piece, just don't try to rush it at all. If you can get one of them to do it at each shows, and you eventually go to a bunch of shows, it will eventually get done. It doesn't have to be done today. So this was one that I did all 9 panels of these last year, but it started between cons. I contacted 2 of the artists, the ones who did Omega Red and Sinister, who were Daniel Govar and Tony Moy. I had met them at Dragon Con on a couple of successive years, and I knew that they did watercolor, and I said, would you guys like to work on an X-Men villain jam piece? And so they were sitting together at some other con, I don't even know what it was, and did their 2 panels at a start and brought it to me at Dragon Con, and then I started filling it out with the other artists gradually, and all these got done over the course of 2022.
Well, very nice. I like Govar and Moy's work a lot. But they do take time. I think that's the story we hear from anybody who's worked on a jam piece. It's always, you have to be. It can take you years to get something done. And whether they're done in a fixed format like this, or if there's jam pieces where they'll have one artist like kind of lay out the whole page for everybody, and maybe that artist might finish one of the characters, and then they get a different artist to do the rest. And I think you're right about it being the long game to see it through.
Yeah, and what you just described is exactly what I'm doing with this year's jam piece, which is a recreation of the Micronauts #1 cover. I got Jeff Isherwood to do the layout and then do the central figure of Space Glider. And then Michael Golden has done Baron Karza, and I'm getting some other people to do some of the other ones. So that's a great way to go. If anybody wants to do a jam piece, some planning is helpful. And then experience. You have to do it once to just understand how the process works. This one, a couple of the pieces were done at Dragon Con last year, and then I had artists mail it around after Dragon Con to finish it so they didn't have to feel pressured.
No, well, it turned out well, and all in color too. Typically, you don't see jam pieces all in color.
Yeah.
All right. Now here's the I've always liked Bing's work. This is a nice piece.
Right. So this one hits multiple of my buttons. Number one, it's yes, Kitty Pryde again. The Lockheed looks terrific on this, though. All that musculature, it's very nicely done. And I forget where I got this. This is not one I commissioned. It's a secondhand piece, but I love type pencils, and I looked through a lot of my ones that fit this general category to decide which one of them I was going to show tonight. But it's fun, and there's sort of a little joke because there's a Lockheed above her and a Lockheed below her. Especially with Kitty Pryde, she's a character that I feel like needs to be portrayed strongly as opposed to come hither. And her pouting at the camera or something that was clearly done from some reference of a model of a certain sort isn't really what I think the character is about.
No, that's that's a really nice piece. So this is something that you would have picked up in the aftermarket.
Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to remember if this was a CAF Live piece or a Heritage piece. I know that there was one time a couple years ago, someone who was clearly an avid Kitty Pryde collector put like 24 pieces at once on Comic Link, and I got probably half a dozen of them. When the market was flooded like that, that probably wasn't. They might have gone for more if they had been eked out slowly. But I was happy to get several because I really liked them, and I have several in my CAF gallery. I have a whole Kitty and Ileana gallery.
Well, that's a word of caution for those of you looking to liquidate your, whatever your collecting focus is all at once. That it will tend to backfire. Any good auction house will probably try to measure those out over time so that you receive the maximum amount that you could get for it. But sometimes it works out well. Robert, it sounds like you scored there, and that was good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great on the buyer's end, certainly. And, to get a favorite character and a bunch of different people giving different concepts of the same character.
Mm-hmm. Now this is that Sikowski I was looking for earlier.
Right.
The 2 pages from issue 397.
Right. So now we're back to, it's always an interesting question just from a comic book history perspective, what the dividing lines are. When did the Silver Age end and the Bronze Age begin? And it's not a simple question. There's many things you could point to. Was it, of the death of Gwen Stacy and Kirby going to DC and Stan leaving the editor-in-chief position, but really different books transitioned at different times according to who was working on them. And this, in my opinion, is the moment that Adventure Comics transitioned from the Silver Age into the Bronze Age. Because if you look at the Adventure Comics of the last page of the previous issue, was done in a very Silver Age-y style. The art was done previously by Adventure Comics. Supergirl was the main character, and every issue had 2 stories, one done by Mort Whittemer and one done by Kurt Schaffenberger. But they got a new editor this issue, Mike Sikowski, who also was writing and doing the pencils. And it instantly turned into a horror book, as you can see on these pages, which Supergirl, of course, had been a romance book throughout the 1960s. And this is just radically different. The amount of black on these pages is probably 3 times as much as had been on the previous run. It's almost as, I'm not saying that Mike Sekowsky is Bill Sienkiewicz, but it was as shocking a change as from Sal Buscema to Bill Sienkiewicz on New Mutants.
Right. I mean, the first panel is amazing, or the whole title page is just, it's gorgeous. It's haunting. I mean, it's a, and then even that the other page, the panel layout's really dynamic, down to that last panel. I mean, just showing just enough of the figure to let you know, that they're in angst, right? I mean, this is these are 2 phenomenal pages. So, wow.
Yeah, and this was something that Supergirl had never, ever, I think I'm safe to say, ever been portrayed like this before, where she was just totally smashed by the villain. And you can see there, like at the top of that page, she's pushing those guys confidently, like, yep, here's another, this looks like a job for Supergirl. People are in danger. I'm going to go crush this guy. And, through his magic powers, she gets a totally different outcome than she expected. This was also important for another reason in the milestone of the character, because 9 issues previously in Supergirl 288, there had been a letter to the editor that said, hey, and maybe this was one that was a plant by the staff, who knows if it was a real fan writing or not, but it said, hey, Wonder Girl got a new costume, and her costume now is not the same as just a baby version of Wonder Woman's costume. Don't you think it's time for Supergirl to get a costume that isn't just a skirt version of Superman's costume? And the editor response was, well, sure, fans, why don't you write us in some ideas for a new Supergirl costume? And so now 9 issues later, finally, the cover of this issue promised that Supergirl was going to get a new costume. And this page shows why, because her costume gets shredded by the magician on the right-hand page there. And that's the pretext for which she goes to Wonder Woman, who at this time has no powers and owns a boutique. And Wonder Woman helps Supergirl put together a new ensemble. And for the next couple of years, about every 3 or 4 issues, Supergirl changed costumes, a lot of them being these reader submissions.
Well, no, these are a couple of great pages. I mean, I'm still smitten by that the title page, though. I mean, it's the tree in the background, all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of work that went into that thing. It's amazing.
I'd be very curious to know what the photo reference was, because the front figure seems like probably some horror movie photo reference that Sekowsky was using. And I would love to know. There's a group on Facebook called Comic Swipes where people dig out the most fascinating origin material for all of our favorite comics panels, like the one of Dark Phoenix on the cover of the X-Men Teen Titans crossover, where Phoenix is holding her hands in a very unusual way, and somebody found the photo that from some old movie poster that was copied off of. And so the splash page actually was sort of funny, because I got multiple pages from this story from a dealer all at once recently, and he was happy to let go of the panel pages, but I could tell he, as a collector himself, his collector's heart was sad that I wanted to buy the splash, which I can totally understand.
Sure. Now, this next piece, we've got 2 images to show for it. So we'll show the pencil piece first.
Right. So this is the prelim. This was a Lake Como pickup from Giorgio Camolo, whose style is an interesting mashup, seems to me. Obviously, the Geiger reference is loud and clear on this image. And then some of his other art especially looks more clearly Kirby. But this thing is huge. Even the prelim is 18 by 24. And the finished color piece is done separately, is a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah, Kamala's amazing. He, I mean, I've loved his work for a long time. I commissioned him almost like 18, 19 years ago. And he's just, he's a gift. I wish he was doing more work for publishers, because he certainly deserves it. I mean, and it's fairly quick. I mean, it's not like, as much detail as he puts into all these, whether they're just, black and white ink wash pieces or they're color painted pieces like this. He's, once he gets in there, he's not slow. He's pretty prolific as the amount of work he puts out. but I've always admired him.
And he's also surprisingly affordable considering the quality and the size of the work. I actually have it on the wall here behind me. If you want to go to me, I hung it up here so people could see how big it is. But it's, you know, it's a very, very nice size. Too big for my portfolio.
Yeah, that's I just love his stuff. And you're right, he can riff on Kirby. I mean, you give him a genre or an artist and he can do it. But he excuse me, he a lot of times puts in those very ornate borders around some of his pieces. I mean, whatever floats his fancy, he'll do. I commissioned him for that Infected by Art book that we do every year. It was about 6, maybe even 7 years ago. We decided to put a book plate in, and I commissioned him to do a border artwork with just like science fiction in one quarter of it, fantasy in another, steampunk in another, and then horror in the other, and it just came out phenomenal. And and that's what we used for the signatures and everything. And yeah, he's just amazing. I mean, if I could commission him once a year, I would do it, just because he's so good. He's and like you said, he's very affordable, and I know he doesn't speak any English, right? Because you got to meet him.
No, he does. No, he does. He was at Como. His English and his wife's, I assume it was his wife, were serviceable, and they were.
Oh, that's good.
Como, and I could communicate directly with him. Yeah, some of the artists not, but he was, sure. Yeah, I mean, just the work that went into the prelim is astonishing. And another collector actually tried to buy this off of me immediately. Not 5 minutes after I had bought it from Komolo, and I declined, but pointed out that Komolo had lots of other good stuff for sale, and you guys should check him out. And he ships, and he's cheaper than you might think, and the work is stunning.
Yeah, and he's on CAF too. I mean, you can look him up. He is a premium member.
Yes, and I have to give CAF credit for me even knowing that he existed, because that Modoc piece that you guys featured on a Thursday night was like, oh wow, that's a really interesting artist. I need to find out about this guy. And so I knew about him going to Como and made a point to look him up because of CAF.
CAF again played a role. That's good. That's Kazra's piece, I think. Kazra's had Komolo do a few pieces for him, and I know he's got a Modoc or two out of him as well. But yeah, he's amazing. Everybody should have at least one Komolo in their collection. I can't say enough good things about him. But it's funny, every time I think his rep maintains his CAF gallery, and typically, at least that was the vibe I got. That was why when I would, I had to work everything right through the rep, because he wasn't comfortable, emailing me directly. I don't know, but that's good. Let's see. We got 3 more pieces to look at here. And again, you have a lot of different tastes in artwork, Robert.
Right. So this is another example of an artist that I only discovered when I was older. This is Hugo Pratt, who's known for Cordo Maltese. And I had never heard of Cordo Maltese, but I was part of another Facebook forum, not a Facebook forum, an internet forum that was still running on an old message board dedicated to classic comics. And there were people there talking about artists and comics I had never heard of as a early 80s reading kid. And Cordo Maltese was one of them. So he was on my radar as someone who was significant. And when I went to Lake Como, there was I think a French dealer there, or maybe Italian, I'm not sure. I think they were Italian, because I think their offices were in Milan, and they had a bunch of Hugo Pratt pages. This is not Cordo Maltese. It's a series he was working on simultaneously in the mid-1960s called Sandakan, and that Sandakan is the name of the pirate who you see there, the swarthy-looking fellow. And I did some research subsequently to understand who this was. And basically, of course, there was a time in world history where pirates were only thought of as murderers and rapists, which has basis in fact. But then at some point there became this concept of fun pirates and good pirates, like Peter Pan and Jack Sparrow. And how did that happen? Well, one of the important transitionary figures in that happening was this character Sandakan, who was a late 19th century character from Italian serialized novels about a noble pirate living in the South Seas, fighting the evil British who have murdered his family, and he was a prince who's now been cast down and must make his way as a pirate. And here on in his first story, which was a novel originally, he falls in love with a beautiful English girl and has to figure out what to do with his conflicted feelings. And so I happened to buy the very page which features the meeting. So that was a nice get.
Were you seeking this particular page, or did it just kind of happen?
No, yeah. I was just looking through the book. I didn't, at the time I got this, I didn't really understand who the character was. I was just looking through, but it seemed like a significant page, and then indeed turned out to be maybe the most significant page of the story, arguably, because it totally turns the character's life upside down and drives the whole rest of the narrative.
Where did you pick this one up?
This one was at Lake Como from a dealer. It was the same dealer. He had Serpieri was sitting at his table offering his Druna pages, which I also got one of. And then
I can't show that on our live stream, right? Or is it
that one I can. If you want to look it up in my CAF, it's you can show that. It's safe. Because one of my other values is I like to have art that I can show people, and so getting a Druna page that was showable was a nice thing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I remember I remember there was a show I did, like a CAF update we did, and I was like, I finally have a Serpieri I can show, and we'll find out if it was yours or not. I don't remember, but because he's just so hard to to find pages like that, but he's so talented.
Yeah, and it has Druna on it. She's just showable. So the Serpieri was sitting at the table, and I got one of his pages and when you get one of his, he works in pencil and ink on one page. You can see here the black and white. There it is, which is large. This is I don't know, it's like 14 by 18 or something page, and then he shrinks it down and watercolors a copy of it, and that's in the additional images.
Interesting. Yeah, it's amazing. So I love his stuff.
Yeah, and so I got the black and white version and the color version of this. This is not Morlock material, but I was again happy to get a good representative from him. There he is with both. You can see how large they are.
Wow.
And so right behind him is the book that has the Hugo Pratt pages over there on that table over his shoulder.
Well, then going to Como paid off, man. That's wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that, I give all credit to my wife for many reasons. One of which was she let me go to Como, and she said I could go if she could come with me, because she wanted to sit by the lake in Italy and relax while I was doing my comic book thing.
Well, Como is definitely a show where you can bring your significant other with you, and they will have a good time, without question.
Yes, a good time was definitely had by all that weekend.
That's awesome. Well, congrats on picking up that Serpieri. I'm glad I don't think that was the piece I featured, though. I'll have to go back and see. But no, I love Serpieri stuff. I love his color stuff. I mean, man, what a talent. Now, this next piece is on the back wall behind you.
Yes. So this is Nicholas Scott from last year. And I forget how I first ran across. Oh, I know. She's another one that I first ran across because of you, because I think one of her, you featured another one of her pieces that was like, I forget, had a bunch of different versions of Wonder Woman on it on one of your Thursday nights with Chris Norick. And I thought, wow, that's a really nice artist. I do this regularly when I'm watching the Thursday night, is when you guys feature an artist I haven't heard of, which is extremely common. And I go look up their website and see what they're about. And so she's one that I found out about that way, and I've been watching her website. And I had actually gotten a couple of other smaller pieces from her. This is from a Wonder Woman origin story book that came out last year. It had 3 issues, one by Phil Jimenez, one by Gene Ha, and one by Nicholas Scott, telling the origin of Hippolyta, really, and how the Amazons came to be. And this is the Nicholas Scott is the only one of the 3 who worked traditionally. The other 2 were truly digital, and all 3 are extremely beautiful. If you haven't read Wonder Woman Historia, you will very much enjoy the art in that. But hers is the only one that was actually available as not just an artist proof, but the original art. And this is the centerpiece of her chapter, which is Hercules and Hercules in this story is like 9 feet tall, and he confronts the Amazons to try to teach them a lesson, and instead they all gang up on him. The center panel, you can if you could see it better there, is like dozens of ants destroying a praying mantis, which is a metaphor for what the Amazons are doing to Hercules. Gene Ha invented like 35 different Amazon characters and demigoddesses, each with their own armor, their own name, their own favorite ice cream and what have you. And they were used throughout the series by all 3 artists. And so most of them are here, either the central panel or around the edges. And I think Nicola Scott told me she spent 10 days on this spread.
Wow. Well, I'm sure she didn't get paid more for doing a DPS, yeah. but obviously the care put into this is just phenomenal.
Yeah. Wow. There's I think 17 figures in the middle and 35 figures around the edge, plus that central panel. And if you look on my CAF gallery, where I'll post this, I'll make it live, soon. She is an interesting artist because she works in mirror image on the back. She does a layout in pencil on the back of every page in mirror image, and then I guess light boxes through it to do the final version. And so it's always fascinating to compare the difference. I have probably half a dozen pages from her on my CAF gallery. You can see from the other pages that are already up how she does this, and I'll post this one as well. But it's huge. If you'll go, you can go back to me here and you can see how big on the wall this sucker is. It's a mammoth work. It's on two pages folded.
Wow, that's impressive. And I was looking at your CAF. Yeah, you have 8 other pieces by Nicola.
Yeah, and she's a great example of again, a lot of her work is type pencils, which a lot of my collection is type pencils, and they're also largely inexpensive. So those of you looking for awesome cheap art, clean her store out.
All right, well, we have one final piece to check out.
All right.
And it's a beautiful vest.
All right. So this was Charles Vest piece that I picked up at Heroes Con when I was there, and was happy to meet him. And this is a novel illustration. He did probably a dozen illustrations for a novel that came out a couple years ago called Honeycomb, which is a very imaginative fantasy allegory by a woman named Joanne M. Harris. Has like 100 short chapters is the concept, but it's a story about creativity and the life of the artist. And it has like one chapter will be about, once there was an artist who made some cool work, but her agent kept trying to get her to do different work. And it's obviously inspired by things that, from the real life of the artist. But Vess's work, of course, is beautiful. And I think Benno was probably one person who was a strong Vess advocate that helped me to understand the value of his work.
Benno has definitely picked up a few pieces by Vess over the years, and it was cool. I saw several, like Jason D'Ambrosio picked up a Vess piece while I was there, and I was like, people kind of go out of their comfort zones or what we're used to seeing them buy when they get exposed to art like this, and I think that's always a great thing, right? I mean, because Vess has been around since the days of the studio, and he's just an incredible talent. I mean, he's still making great work today.
Yeah. So I'm just a fan of art in general, and so I'm happy to get comic book pieces because there's so much great art in comic books, but it's by no means limited to the world of comic books. And just like the water effects on this are stunning. So being able to pick up one from Mr. Vess himself was also delightful.
Definitely. I kind of, I didn't go by his table at Heroes. I regret that. I would have loved to have seen what he brought.
Yeah. And it's a cool novel too. If any of you just like reading a fun fantasy novel, and it's one that you can, I have a plan on reading it right now for my kids. I have 8 and 11-year-old that I read a bedtime story to, and we've already done Lord of the Rings. We've already done Harry Potter. Right now, we're actually doing Sandakan is our bedtime story, and I plan for this Honeycomb book to be our next bedtime reading book.
Wow, they are getting some great works of literature, aren't they? Darn.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. So
Well,
we had a
that's
fun
cool.
time.
Was he set up with like John Flesks, and was that where Bess was at Heroes?
I'm not sure. He had a large prominent table fairly near the entrance.
I don't know how I knew he was there, but I never saw him, and I'm sure I probably walked
Yeah.
by him a dozen times and just
Yeah.
was just being an airhead. But because he's an artist I've never had a chance to talk to in person. I would have loved to have looked at the art he brought, and I got the
Yeah.
chance to talk with him a little bit.
Yeah. There. Well, it sounds like he'd be a regular. He's at surprisingly, there's a small convention in I think Bristol, Tennessee, over Labor Day weekend that he's going to be at, and I think Jeff Smith is going to be there too.
Yeah.
Albeit Dragon Con with Benno, but for anybody who's in that neck of the woods, because it's I guess maybe counter programming to Dragon Con or something.
Right. Well, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like Dragon Con is typically a show you wouldn't want to go up against, right? At least in the same area.
Yeah,
But if you have Jeff Smith there, that he's always going to be a draw, and Vess as well. So
yeah.
Marcus wants to know if you let your kids watch Dueling Dealers.
They're in bed by then.
There you go, Marcus.
I have to step away from the computer to go do bedtime reading and then come back and see what I missed.
Rich Danny says that he's tabled with Jeff Smith a lot. Oh, that's cool. I did not know that, Rich. And Jeff says thanks for sharing the collection tonight, and on CAF, Robert.
Yeah, well, CAF has been literally invaluable. I don't know how many of the pieces that I showed tonight I would even have if CAF didn't exist as a place for me to learn about artists and interface with other collectors. So it's just a tremendous resource for our whole hobby.
Well, I never get bored having somebody tell me that. It's good. I mean, first many years nobody told me anything that was good about CAF, but the last few have been always nice to hear. So especially for you, Robert, somebody who's new to the hobby, and CAF was instrumental in helping you meet some other people and pick up pieces. I mean, that's great, because I always feel like CAF, there's a lot of problems with CAF, as a site and everything. It's hard to understand what it is when you come to it, especially somebody new. But even despite the challenges I think people have coming to it, there's still a lot of good things have happened thanks to it. So I appreciate hearing that. Yeah.
So I would just encourage everybody out there in the audience to post their stuff so we can all enjoy it together.
That is very true. So we might have a conversation with an artist next week at the same time, right? I don't know if we've heard back from Zachary or not, but have we? Did I miss an email?
No, I haven't heard back from him yet, so I don't know if that's gonna work for that soon, or we'll have to look at something another time. But we'll make it happen one time or another.
Okay, because Robert and I, Robert was talking to me about wanting to have an artist that he knows on the show, and Robert was probably going to join us for that conversation. And I said, well, it'd be great to do an interview with you before we do this other one. So we were trying to figure out a date. So we may be seeing Robert again really soon, or maybe in the early fall. We'll find out. I should probably know by Thursday whether or not we're going to be doing a show with them next week or not. But Robert, this has been great. Like Mikhail said, you are one of the best dressed collectors in the hobby. You are hard to miss in a hall, but and that was very evident from this at Heroes this year. I'm so glad that the second time around was a lot more fun for you than the first one. But to me, it was a great show. I Heroes is definitely always going to be a stop for, I think, many collectors, right? It's always going to be like the go-to show for me as well. And hopefully I'll make it to Heroes or to what is it, Como one day. That seems like a place to go as well.
Yes, and I'll be coming to OAX as well. So, and then I guess MegaCon is the week after, and I convinced my family just to stay for vacation between the two. So,
well, that is definitely the way to do it, right? I mean, there's so many things to do. You can go to either coast in between. I mean, there's and then there's just too many parks. You could never. You'd have to come down once a month for a year to pretty much hit all of the the amusement parks between Tampa and Orlando. So and I've only been out once since I've been down here since October. I'm really screwing up. That part of my reason for coming down here was to actually enjoy the parks. I had it in my head that I would go twice a month, and
Wow.
like whatever, I figured a Friday afternoon, right? If I could do 2 Friday afternoons a month, that'd be fun. It wouldn't be taxing, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm definitely got to fix that somehow. But yeah, that's fantastic. I'm glad, Robert. I mean, I think your family will have a great time. Have you guys been to Orlando together as a family before?
Yeah, we've been several times for
Oh,
Disney
good.
and Universal and all that. So, but but not so much that my kids are bored with it. You know, we go every 1 to 2 years.
Okay.
So they age up into a new experience bracket and have a different experience. So
Exactly. Cool. That's awesome. Well, thank you for doing this, and I guarantee you, we'll be seeing Robert on the channel sometime in the near future or late future. Somewhere along the line, we'll have you back. But no, it's been a lot of fun, Robert, and I appreciate you doing this. I'm starting to like the blue paint more and more as well. I think that really it does make the art pop. Doesn't matter if it's color or black and white. So nice choice there. And all right, everybody, thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We'll I'm not going to be on the show tomorrow with Dan Jurgens. That's postponed until September, but we'll be back on Wednesday with another episode of Dueling Dealers. So have a wonderful